Good afternoon. Hope you're all having a great couple of days. First time I've been here. Really enjoyed the last couple of days. It does feel like a whirlwind, though. It feels like I need time to decompress after these last couple of days about all the connections, the content, the conversations. But thank you all for making the time to come here. I know you've got lots of choices, so thank you for joining us here for the next couple hours. As you can see on the screen, we're going to talk about AI and sustainability, really, which is what my job is. So I work for EY. I'm the global head of AI and sustainability. So I spend all my time thinking about what is the opportunity of AI, and then what is the risk of AI, and what does that bi-directional flow look like? And I think it's a really interesting join and a moment in time that we're in, and we're going to explore that a little bit over the next couple of hours. We're going to do a few different things over this next couple of hours. As you can see, it's called exchange. So there's a hint in that word, which is we're going to share a little bit about what we're thinking and how we see AI and how we see sustainability to some degree as part of that. But then you're going to get an opportunity to interact with real examples through the demos around the screen. So there's 4 big screens around you. You'll all have noticed that. Each of them are a demo of real AI being applied to a real challenge for real impact. Not EY. This is other external partners that we have, startups, other organizations like that. Go back one. So I've introduced myself. At the back of the room, my colleague who'll be joining us halfway through the speech. You'll hear more from him. And we cover this whole space, as I said, around AI and sustainability. We're going to break the conversation into these 3 or 4 different bits. The light and shadow of AI is what I reference in terms of the opportunity and the risk. What does that look like? What does it mean? What's the context of what's happening around us in AI? I've been in technology 28 years, and I've never seen anything like this period I'm in right now. I have spent probably half that time in AI, as we would term it today, which are multiple technologies, but I've never seen anything like this moment in time. The scale of the change, the speed of the change, the long-term effect of the change. I think we're probably underestimating, as we humans normally do. We're overestimating the short term, and I think we're underestimating the long term. But we'll come back to that theme. But the light and shadow is really about that opportunity and risk. The paradigm shift, which is really about how do we think about responsible AI? So in the context of all that change, in the context of that speed, in the context of the opportunity, how do we pause and reflect and be sure and ensure that we're being responsible in our use of AI and everything goes with that? And then I talked about Exchange Carousel, which is this last hour, really, which is you get an opportunity to see real examples, interact with practitioners, ask deep questions, if you wish, about the content and how they are solving the problems they are today. Lastly, and importantly, as all of these events, it's a great opportunity to meet new people. So I encourage you all to connect with people around you that you don't know and take the connections away. I've kind of covered this, but like, what are we thinking about AI? What does it mean? How do we see the acceleration of AI and the innovation that's needed around that? Real world examples, but also then developing relationships. So relationship amongst yourselves, but you'll see through this at a slightly meta level, maybe an example of collaboration that we as EY think is very important. So I fundamentally think this intersection of AI and sustainability is deeply complex. It's a deeply complex, nonlinear problem that humans are not good at solving on their own. So we need to do 2 things. One is we need to be creative about our use of it and how we think about the problems and the answers. And 2 is we need to collaborate quite deeply to be able to solve those questions and be able to do that in the best possible way. So light and shadow, everything just feels really busy. I find myself every day a bit tired almost, because it's just like there's so much going on in the world of AI. It's so busy. Everything's coming at you at speed. The question becomes, how do you create focus? And the question, I think, becomes, how do you cut through the hype to the reality? And I think that's the moment that we're in right now around AI, which is this constant feed of information, change, and everything else that makes it feel very, very busy to us right now. This is kind of what my job feels like sometimes, I think. I feel like I'm this wee child in the yellow rain jacket, which is these waves of things coming at me, these waves of information. And in that, changes happen really slowly, I think, particularly around technology, scale change, not innovation. Innovation's always moved quickly. But scale change used to be a relatively slow thing. Scale change is now a very, very fast thing. So this idea about that by the time you notice that something, by the time something becomes obvious, it's already operational somewhere in the world. And that's a different paradigm for us to deal with when it comes to technology. This idea about the future used to arrive gradually, it's here today and it's happening fast. It's happening all at once. And then this interesting thing that I think is also happening because of the speed. When change is moving so fast, I find it more likely that I and we as humans are reacting. We're not reflecting anymore. It's kind of everything's happening at me, so I'm having to react instinctively to what I think the opportunity is or what the risk might be. The challenge with that is reflection is forward-looking and reaction is kind of backward-looking. If we're not careful, we're building assumptions in that are backward-looking. Because we're reacting things, we don't have the time to pause and reflect forward. So how do we do that? How do we start to design that opportunity into that versus purely just, as I say, reacting to change? We're at a point where machines are better at some stuff than humans are. They're better at maths, they are better at some processes, and that is becoming cheaper. So the speed is happening, the cost is dropping, this idea about answers, analysis, and execution has become cheap. And then in that context, then what do we humans need to be better at? We need to be better at the judgment, the trust, the meaning. If the answers are cheap and the answers are fast, where are we applying judgment to what that answer is? Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it the right path? Is it not? When the analysis is equally cheap and fast, where's the trust? How can we build trust into the models, a trust into the analysis, trust into the outcomes? And then when the execution and the outcomes become cheap and fast, sometimes things happen that go wrong. And in that case, where's the meaning, where's the accountability around that? Where does that live? It's a really complicated space we're in when you take the speed, you take the scale, and you take what's happening now, which is efficiency in things that used to take a long time are happening faster, 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 and becoming cheaper in that context. So a lot of AI feels like a technology conversation, and I think, as you probably gathered, a lot of what I think about is the human challenge of it. This picture looks slightly creepy now. I can see it moving on a big screen. But what it's getting at is kind of this idea about things that in all of our corporate histories, all of our institutional histories, org charts, roles, descriptions, they define things like accountability. They define things like who has to explain when things go wrong, who validates, who decides. The democratization that's happened in the last 2 or 3 years, particularly around AI, has kind of made that redundant. We now have this amazing ability in many, many hands to, per my previous slide, analyze faster, to come to decisions faster, to create actions and execute actions faster than we would before. So it's as much a human challenge as anything else right now. So how do we think about that context of, it's not just a new technology, it is a human challenge, as I say. And we are in this period of disruption. As I said, I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen anything as fast, as scalable, as complex, but also as powerful as some of the capabilities we're seeing. So in that context, what do? Do we go faster? I have a personal concern sometimes that everybody's sprinting. Everybody's sprinting in a race in AI, but I'm not always entirely sure that people know why or where they're going. And I think as humans, we're quite good at slowing stuff down. And I think there's a piece around, so do we just go faster, faster? Do we adopt the faster tools? In some ways, to be cliched, we're still in the faster horses, to reuse that word one more time. Versus, do we think about the fundamental change that's needed? Do we think about the outcomes rather than the inputs to an outcome? And in the context of that, how do you redesign value? And in the context of that, how do we take AI and sustainability together to redefine, redesign, and realize new value for organizations? Acceleration. So now a little bit on what's happening in the world of AI. Many of you will know this, some of you may not, but I think it's good to reflect on where we are in a moment in time. So the first thing, the curve is steepening. Bottom left, performance of models. Performance is increasing at like a scale we've never seen, at a speed we've never seen again. Top right, you see chip. You see chip capability. from all the major providers. These are unbelievable curves. They are believable because they're real, but they're unbelievable in the context of at least my history. So this curve of what's happening to the capability of AI in the compute and what is possible is accelerating upwards. The curve is steepening. Bottom right is a Gaia model. So that kind of looks at how can technology, how can AI execute multiple tasks. I execute a flow rather than an individual task. Again, that curve is slightly crazy. When you look at, you've got 92% is the human baseline at the top. In the course of 5-6 months, we were at 75% of capability. External research model based. So this is about agents, AI, agentic, other forms of AI being able to execute human tasks end to end. So chips are improving, the models are improving, the end-to-end capability of AI is improving. The economics are collapsing. So increasing capability, decreasing cost. My background is as an economist originally, so the demand supply curves, cost curves, etc. What you see on the left is the plot of model pricing. So you see this again, almost like a reverse steep angle of cost of per model pricing. And then token costs. Tokens rightly are the topic of the day, of the month, of the quarter, of the year. How do we get intentional about our use of tokens, and how do we think about all the aspects of responsible AI in that context? So back to my earlier point, intelligence is getting cheaper. Well, capability is getting cheaper. You can judge if it's intelligence or not yet. So capability is going up, economics are collapsing. Outputs are visibly leaping. You'll all have seen the picture on the right. If you haven't, it's a very short depiction of the quality of capability. There's two bits in that little video that I like. One is the timeline. So you start to see this aggregation through time of capability. But two is the very end, which is a conversation between a father and a son over a meal with, I think I'm right in saying it's a one prompt shop. So this was one prompt using the best capability at its time, early this year, to produce this video. The first, in 2020, whatever it was, like 2023, was huge amounts of effort, huge amounts of capital, huge amount of costs. So in some ways it's a trite example, in some ways it's a very instructive example of capability and its evolution. On the left, you also see the capability change through like visualization models and like Midjourney as was, and Midjourney, even then, it's nearly 2 years old now. It's also got, I feel like it's also got slightly more like dystopian in its like depiction, but the quality is so much better than it was. So this distance between innovation and scale, or innovation and tool, is accelerating all the time as well. So what used to take years is now weeks, if not months. And it's broadening. So the capability is going up, the economics are going down, the quality is improving at pace, but the broadening is happening, the adoption is happening faster than ever. So these curves, on the left you see, this is about, the Gaia model I showed you earlier was about multiple tasks and how accurate it can be. The model on the bottom left is about time. How long can AI process a task and activity? With the premise being clearly the longer you can do it, the better you get it, the more input you take and the more you're learning, et cetera, et cetera. So again, 10,000 times bigger over the course of 4 years. So again, this idea about the capabilities broadening, and then on the right, you see adoption of technology. So again, let's take internet as in terms of my generation, that was the biggest ever disruption. 25 years to get 91% adoption. Gen AI, 53% adoption in 2.5 years. Now the world is different than it was when the internet was launched, clearly, and there's an amplifying effect of all the technologies, clearly. But the point of this is adoption. So the adoption is happening faster and wider than it ever has before. And again, that's building on lots of past technology changes in telecoms and infrastructure and everything else. So as I say, capability is compounding, costs are falling, uptake is rising. So the question isn't anymore whether AI can do this or will it scale. question is how. The question is, what else scales with it? And with half of my job being about thinking about how to do that in a sustainable fashion and a responsible fashion. So how do we think about how we scale for benefit and opportunity, but also how do we scale whilst minimizing risk and whilst minimizing impact in that sense? So now Zahan's going to talk to us a little bit about business disruption. So I've told you a little bit about what it feels like sometimes to be a human in the context of this change. I've told you a little bit about AI and kind of what's happening around that. We're going to have a quick look at business disruption. So how does all that come to bear in terms of a business and what does that look like? And then we're going to come back to a couple of examples and then we're going to get into the demos.
Thank you very much. Quick intro from my side. Hi guys, yes. You did a great job. My name is Zahan. I work in EY's global sustainability team, where I lead creative and innovation, where we're trying to design new products, experiences, workshops to get people to think further and faster in their sustainability ambition. And we're going to get you up out of your seats in a bit, but I just want to contextualize everything you just heard. You heard about the acceleration. Now let's operationalize that acceleration. How are we seeing these AI developments, this death by charts that you just got over the last 5 minutes, how is that actually impacting economics? Changing competitions, workflows, customer experiences, really our way of thinking, living, and working. So starting with search. We used to search for information. Today, we no longer search for information. We're now searching for outcomes. And what does that mean? It means that workflows are being completely shifted and business models of how we used to think a particular outcome would be orchestrated by a set of workflows is being completely changed. My favorite example of that is Perplexity's computer, launched earlier this year. And within the first couple of days, using the power of Perplexity's computer, people were able to create a model that matched Bloomberg's terminal. All of us here will be familiar with Bloomberg's terminal, economic and financial analysis. It costs $30,000 a year to have your own Bloomberg terminal. Today, just with a Perplexity computer subscription, you can have that same capability for $200. Complete shift in feasibility. And what used to take hours, what used to take high cost, what used to be high effort, is now completely the opposite. Similarly, chat. I think something I've heard a couple of days ago here is that chat is now leaving the chat window, and I totally agree. We're no longer looking for chat outcomes within the chat window. We're looking for them in terms of how we're actually executing tasks enabled by those chat functions. So, Copilot co-work. We work with Copilot a lot in Microsoft in EY. It's allowing us to move from just a single chat window to how are we taking decisions? How is it helping us with research? How is it helping us with communications? How is it helping us with producing reports? All through a single workflow, orchestrated by Copilot, but lots of different capabilities within that. Scale. What did scale mean for the last 100 years? If you wanted to scale for the last 100 years, it meant you had to increase headcount. Really, that is no longer the case. And the best example for that is these unicorns that have started to pop up. Unicorns are one-person startups that are making high leverage of AI capabilities and data in order, with zero overheads, to scale. And examples of these unicorns: Remote OK, Nomad List, Stardew Valley, single employees reaching a $1 billion valuation. But it's not just commercial, and that's why I included that last bit at the bottom. Impact entrepreneurs are now also leveraging these same capabilities. And in this room, we've seen capabilities in helping deal with dementia patients in the room, how entrepreneurs are leveraging AI to help with labor rights, public service access, climate adaptation, how a single person, for me, this is powerful because think of your roles in this room. Think of something that a year ago was too expensive, too complex, or too slow to do. And I'd ask you to rethink about that problem today. Is AI going to fundamentally change how you can tackle that problem? But here's where we start to see some of that shadow, as we talk about light and shadow, come in. Automation without judgment can damage brand, can damage impact, can damage outcomes. So replacing people is easy. Klarna, in 2025, they launched an AI assistant which aimed to do the work of 700 customer service reps. It went live, they thought it was a success, but immediately they got negative customer feedback. And what happened was they had to rehire employees in order to maintain their brand quality. So as you're scaling, you need to make sure you're scaling with trust and maintaining what you're known for. Because at the end of the day, what's scarce now is no longer outcomes, it's no longer outputs. Trust is going to be what's scarce. So we need to make sure we're not losing that as we scale. Another look at light and shadow in the healthcare sector. Healthcare sector is quite commonly propped up as a leading sector in the take-up of AI. My own GP, who I went to a couple of months ago, I was talking to him about how he's using AI in a daily basis. Over 80% of physicians today are using AI, but a Boston Medical Association research in 2026 found that AI systems can miss initial diagnoses in over 80% of cases. So clearly, we're not near a space where AI models can act on their own. And when adoption outpaces judgment, we need to make sure that the biases and errors which are in those key data sets are not scaled with it. And clearly, humans are going to be part of this loop for a long time going forward, particularly in critical sectors like medicine or in flight, for example. Knowledge is no longer sitting on my device, in my head. It's all about being operationalized and available to everybody. And this is one of my favorite examples as well. From somebody else in the professional services sector, McKinsey, they launched a chatbot, Lily, aimed at centralizing workflows, providing resource documentation, driving productivity gains. Sounds great on paper, right? It's what we all need, using all our IP, taking all our IP that we have, and democratizing it for the entire company. What happened was, in February of this year, McKinsey was hacked overnight by an ethical hacking company called CodeWall. Overnight, with a particular flaw in a single API, they were able to get access to all of Lily's IP. So what does that mean? 700,000 files, 57,000 client accounts, 46 million chat messages, all overnight became available to this ethical hacking company. So yes, we can operationalize knowledge fast, but if that knowledge is of big value to us, which particularly for a professional services firm like McKinsey or ourselves is our strength, we need to make sure we're operationalizing the trust that goes with it. All right, we've spent a long time talking about AI. I'm going to bring in sustainability as well, because I actually don't see them as two separate things. In EY, we talk about megatrends a lot, and we actually see AI and sustainability, along with a few others, being these megatrends, these tectonic shifts that are completely reshaping our ways of living and working. So AI, yes, redefining our ways of life. It's entering the workplace, it's entering our homes, helping us operate businesses, helping us make decisions. Sustainability, it's been around for decades now. It's all about how we're making business decisions today with a long-term overview. Together, that's where I think the interesting spot is. That's where some of the risk is, but also that's where I also think the biggest opportunity is. Because if we use the power of AI to accelerate sustainable development, I think that's where we can get the outcomes where in places like this conference, where we talk about the North Star, the transform scenario, the goal of where we want to get to, I think by the combination of these two tectonic forces, that's how we get there. So what did EY do about this? Over the last 12 years, we've been running an AI and sustainability program, and we put out some research at the start of this year on AI, sustainability, and responsible AI. And I want to share some of those insights with you. There's a deep bibliography that goes behind all of this research. Happy to share it all with you, but just some top-line statistics. Starting a bit with the light, the opportunity that comes with sustainability, and particularly how we can apply AI for sustainability positively. So prediction, starting, how we can help model environmental scenarios and help take today's data and scale it to what does data look like tomorrow, in 2030, in 2050. Detection, particularly detection of climate risks, particularly with escalating physical risks from climate change. I think you'll see this in some demos around the room later, how we can use AI to detect these very early on. Simulation, using digital simulated environments to test, to iterate. There really is power in allowing us to iterate quickly. And this was at a fashion AI talk that I attended 2 days ago here, where iteration and simulated environments are not a bad thing, because I think it will lead to more ideas being brought to market, because they'll be able to be iterated faster in these simulated environments. Optimization, energy efficiency, maintenance, as you'll see later on in the ecosystem carousel later. Monitoring as well, how we're able to track multiple assets, how we're able to track progress, trends over time. And finally, inclusion, very important, a theme that has been picked up across lots of events at AI for Good, how we're using tools to improve accessibility and remove barriers for those who are most affected today. But let's talk about the shadow now, starting with the environmental. The conversation 12 months ago focused very much on data centers. If we saw models as sort of the brain of AI, these data centers are the backbone of AI. And as we can see, and as we know, to be honest, as the headlines suggest, data centers do have a huge footprint, not just in terms of energy and water, which are the things that are most commonly talked about today, but in terms of critical resource use and in terms of the biodiversity of their surrounding habitats. So data centers, they will represent 4.5% of global energy consumption in 2030. Models, where we actually used to think most of the environmental footprint used to be was in the training of those models. Today, we don't think that, but models still have a very, very large footprint. And what I want to flag is these figures you see for training GPT-5, that's just the figure for training one model for one company, OpenAI's GPT-5, where they estimated it took the equivalent of 300 average US homes for a year to train this model. One company. In this room, I'm sure we've got 5 other companies with 5 other models here as well. Hardware manufacturing. This is where we're starting to understand a bit more of where this footprint lies. 20 to 50% of the total carbon footprint of AI systems lies in this hardware. And this is also a key consideration in terms of sovereignty of AI and how critical minerals and key parts of this hardware in the AI supply chain need to be managed. Because it's not just about planning for AI in terms of the model, but it's also all about the engineering that fits around it. And then finally, prompts, how we tend to use AI mostly in this room. We know that a single prompt has a particular footprint. Actually, today, if anybody tells you they can calculate exactly the footprint of a single prompt, they're probably lying to you. We don't have that capability yet, but through high-level aggregated data and research, we're able to estimate that. And we've started to do that at EY itself through token dashboards, based on the type of prompt, based on the type of output you're drawing from, what your footprint is. So you can see that clearly each prompt as well does carry a weight. We shouldn't be placing all the onus on individuals in AI, just as we shouldn't be placing it in sustainability, but it's important to think about as well. And finally, a stat that we found online that I find quite frightening is HSBC's analysis of OpenAI. Again, just OpenAI, just one company, found that by 2030, they would need the energy equivalent of 35 nuclear reactors. Today, we have about 400 nuclear reactors in the world, so make of that what you will. And then moving on from environment to social. Environment was the focus of the impact conversation about 12 months ago. Now we're starting to see that social conversation catch up as well. So some of the research that we've done with clients, and as you can see, I'll start on the right-hand side. We did a Responsible AI Pulse survey where we asked our client leaders about how much they were interested in how much AI was a priority for them, and all of them agreed, but they all agreed that it was a big risk for them as well. And the controls they had in place to mitigate this risk, 49%, said that they didn't think they were up to par, particularly around the social implications. And so what do we mean by social implications? We work with our EY existing social sustainability teams. They have established social sustainability standards, looking at human rights, looking at D&I, looking at workforce planning, and we try to integrate responsible AI frameworks with our social sustainability frameworks. And some of the things we found in our research found that people are worried about how AI will negatively impact those already at risk, so exacerbating divides that are already there today rather than helping bridge them. AI will result in job losses. I think everybody here at some point, whether it was today or 2 years ago, has had this thought cross their mind. And discrimination against certain parts of the community as a large concern. Again, we can see that's a big concern, particularly for consumers. So that, again, we're happy to share some of the research around this. There's much more that goes behind this. I encourage you to listen to a few talks. Even I attended a talk from the Sustainable AI group this morning. They have great research surrounding this. What we're trying to do here is aggregate some of the great research that we're seeing and synthesize it so for ourselves and for people like you in this room, it becomes a clear and alarming story. So what do we do about it? And EY being EY, we did what we do best is we produced a framework. And this is our responsible AI framework. The idea being if you as a entity were developing and deploying your own AI model, what are the considerations you need to think about? I can see lots of phones going up. I'd actually encourage you to just Google EY Responsible AI Framework. There is a whole set of assets that sit behind this, and both on the intention behind the framework, some of the key design requirements behind the framework, and how you can use this for your own context. So just Google EY Responsible AI Framework. Hopefully you have all the tools you need. And I think why this is good is frameworks are not meant to just complicate things for the sake of complicating things. What they're useful for is helping us ask the right questions at the right time. So slowly I'll start going around the wheel, starting with 1 o'clock sustainability. How are environmental and social impacts being considered, as we just saw? Data protection. Is personal or sensitive data being protected? Accountability. Who owns the outcome? And particularly when something goes wrong, who's held accountable? Explainability. Can we explain decisions being made? Particularly if we're relying on outputs from AI to make decisions, how can we make sure we know where those decisions are coming from and we can rely on them? Reliability. Can we trust it to work consistently as we're integrating it into our workflows? Fairness. Could this create bias or unequal outcomes when people are using this? Transparency. Do people know AI is being used and how their data is being used in this context? Security. Could data and could people's interactions with this AI be misused? And then finally, compliance. Would this stand up to legal and regulatory scrutiny? So that's the responsible AI framework. And usually what we would do is here, I'd say, David and I are here all week. Come and speak to us about how we can help you use the responsible AI framework, and job done, we can all leave. But I don't want to leave you with that, because frameworks are great. They provide us a shared language. They provide us a direction we want to head towards. They help us synthesize what we know. But frameworks are only really good when we know what the future looks like. And unfortunately, particularly with sustainability and particularly with AI, now more than ever, we don't know what that future looks like. So now more than ever, actually, we need to go beyond the framework. And actually what we're trying to, when we talk to business leaders, is it's not just about applying responsible AI as a single framework at a single point, as a single intervention. It's about a behavior that we adopt. It's not just that checklist. It's something that you need to consciously think about throughout your entire life cycle. Whenever we're thinking about using AI, we need to think about what is our intended outcome and what could be an unintended consequence. Who do we aim to deliver this towards? And who else could be affected by this? What is, as we say, the light of this outcome, and what is the shadow? And I like this quote that I recently came across, because what it showed for me is light and shadow, not a new concept. E.M. Forrester in 1908 talked about, and I'll just read this quote quickly, "We cast a shadow on something wherever we stand, and it's no good moving from place to save things. Choose a place where you won't do very much harm, and stand in it for all you're worth, facing the sunshine." I like this because the shadow of AI is very real. I don't want us to be scared of it. I don't want us to shy away completely from AI because of it. But I think we need to make sure we're very cognizant of the reality of that shadow. But at the same time, let's think about how we can maximize the light that comes alongside it. So, all of us here are leaders in some sense, whether you're from policy, technology, finance, business. And responsible leaders have been having to hold tensions for a long time. You've been having to think about profit and purpose. You've been having to think about long-term versus short-term. I ask you to think about light and shadow at the same time when you're thinking about AI. Let's move away from the binary of the conversation around AI as it was a year ago, as we must use it or we mustn't use it. Let's start to build a bit more nuance in this, and let's start to think about this light and shadow concept as we use AI through our work. So, enough of us talking and enough of soliloquies. Now we're going to get to some real solutions. And I want to start actually with a solution from EY that David's going to talk us through. We are part of our climate change and sustainability services team. And as part of our team, for a long time, we've had great people, we've had great technology, lots of different tech capabilities, lots of different acronyms, some of which we couldn't even understand, let alone others understand. What we're trying to do now with EY Horizon, as you'll see, is we're trying to amalgamate those together into a single flow, looking at climate risk, nature risk, and decarbonization. And David is going to walk you through that very quickly.
Thanks, Anne. Just a couple of thoughts before we get into the demo. This idea about light and shadow, there's two other dimensions that are really interesting to me that I think are slightly unique. A lot of the opportunity around AI is global in scale and opportunity. A lot of the impact AI is hyper-local. And I think that's a nuance that isn't always well understood, and we need to be thoughtful and intentional about that. The second one is there's a bit of a dislocation in time, potentially, around the opportunity and risk again. Because I'm a natural optimist, so I see the huge opportunity, but they tend to be longer on the time horizon. They tend to be mid-term, long-term. The impacts are far closer, far more near-term. So there's a time dislocation there that I also think is interesting about, can we get through the near-term to be able to get to the opportunity on the long-term? So Horizon, let me go back one more stage, which is we've spent the last 5 years building technology-related, some AI-ish capability around 5 big dimensions. 1 is climate risk, 2 is nature risk, 3 is decarbonization. How do you decarbonize industries and companies? And then 4 actually is around human rights in the supply chain. So we've built 4 core products, externally recognized, all great. Many backed by pretty large compute, large models, etc. But they're 4 individual solutions to individual questions. What we're trying to do now with this Horizon product is stitch all that together. So I believe a lot of companies, organizations, entities, NGOs, whoever you are, communities, want a more sophisticated thought on sustainability. It's not a kind of a unit, tell me what my exposure is to climate risk. It's a much more sophisticated, deeper, richer conversation. And in that conversation, how do we bring that to life for those organizations? How do we move it away from it's a good, bad thing, it's a qualitative thing, into more of a quantitative thing? So this is really what Horizon is trying to get at. Everything you're going to look at is built through agentic AI. So we gave a bunch of capability and technology, a framework, again, per the earlier conversation, but slightly different framework. And then what we've let run is agentic AI goes out, finds public data on companies, and starts to render what you're about to see. It's doing the analysis. We've built agents on top of those 4 products I described, and then we're using agentic AI across the top to stitch it all together and to render what you're about to look at. So I mentioned it's to help companies think about what does climate and nature risk mean for them. And what we do first is we break a company or an entity into a value chain. So these 4 levels you see here, every company gets broken down into 4 value chains automatically by the agents, and dynamically they scrape, they analyze, they ingest so that they have relevant context and language used in each piece. And then, is this? Actually, it's probably easier if I still use this. Thank you. And then if you look at one specific or not, this is the perennial problem, isn't it? This is like, let me just go back. How do we get back from here?
Talk.
I should have kept the early bit for this bit, shouldn't I? And then I could have talked all those other bits about time dislocations and everything else. So, good, it's re-signing in, so that's good. So we're bringing together, we used agentic AI. One of the other things is how we've done this. So this has been done over the course of, come on, dashboard data. All right, you got a glimpse of it, thank you. So the original prototype for this, and it goes to show back my earlier point about how fast things are moving. We built a prototype of this using the Figma product, using data, using our scientists, etc. It took us probably about 4 months and quite a lot of dedicated human effort. We can now render these in half a day. So this has gone from being weeks, months of a lot of human effort to being 4 hours, let's call it that, 4 to 5 hours. And what it's doing is the agents have gone out, used those models I described, found out all it can about this company. In this case, it's a generic automotive company. And it's taken an asset-based view. So the point here is for a board, for a CFO, for a factory owner, how can I understand what risk I'm carrying? My exposure risk and my vulnerability risk at an asset level and at a company level, and we'll come back to that. So what you see here is it automatically defaults to a location, demo asset 1, and it extrapolates and reports the carbon footprint for that asset location. And on the bottom left, it's giving you climate analysis using IPCC models across 2 timeframes, 2030, 2050, and across half a dozen hazards or more. And then 2 different IPCC evaluation scenarios. One is kind of BAU, one is slightly worse than that. So you can see in this case, there's not a huge amount of delta over time. Behind each of the hazards are then multiple layers of hazard evaluation. So under flood, as an example, 5 different flood evaluations done from fluvial all the way down. But again, all of this is agents going out to science models, rendering that back, using agentic flow, and then depicting this. You can go out, see all the locations, all the asset locations for this company, and let's choose another location, which is another heavy manufacturing location, this time on the east coast of the US. Again, you see the updated carbon footprint. You also see the updated hazard risks on the bottom left. And so you start to see this differential on long-term risk, primarily in extreme heat and water stress. So where this asset has been built. What you start to see in the text, though, is, again, natural language extraction from the science, from the data, into natural language to articulate a little bit more on a human level, what does that risk really mean for you? So it's picked a scenario, and it's picked a time frame, and it's describing by each of these classifications of risk what's example from a natural language. This isn't perfect, but this is a start. I'll just clarify that. And then if you look at vulnerability, you then start to see what the vulnerability of those risk factors are. Top left, that is clearly not an asset manufacturing location in the east coast of the US. It looks more like a location in Aberdeen in Scotland, where I'm from, in spring. But what we're going to have here is augmented view. So we're going to use AI to augment imagery to be able to show what this location looks like in the future based on a scenario. So using that AI visuals and augmenting that with the science to be able to, again, to bring it to life a little bit for a client. But what you see in the top right is carbon cost. So using NGFS scenarios for this company, for this asset, what's your exposure to carbon cost look like over time under different scenarios? Delayed transition, fragmented world, hitting net zero by 2050. So again, bringing it to life. Why should I care about climate if I'm a board? Well, you've got a direct carbon cost allocation here. And then vulnerability, bottom left. It's clearly picked out the two main hazards, extreme heat and flood, and it's annualized by hazard what that financial effect could be for that asset for you. Flood looks small, but that's a once in 100-year event. So the actual impact is 100 times that. But you've got to ratio it back to be able to hit the one in 100-year time. And then this aggregate bottom left, annualized loss trend per scenario. Again, the detail is interesting. You can argue all day about some of the facts, I'm sure. The point is, how do you bring it to life? If I'm at the board of a company, if I'm an organization, why should I care about this thing called climate risk and nature risk? And on nature, what's your biodiversity impact look like, and what's your water risk look like? But then you get to, hopefully. So that's all interesting, but again, what can I do about it? And what I can do about it is adaptation. So we then take all of our decarbonization libraries, we take all of our adaptation measures, and we bring it to life, and we focus it and run it on this location. So you take the science, you take the risks, you take the adaptation, and then you run loads of scenarios and evaluations. And then what you see here on the left is all the adaptations the models have proposed, the agents are proposing. Around your main hazards of extreme heat, And then scroll down, water stress. It's giving you the individual measure, the individual adaptation measure. It's taking an approximation of costs, so it's doing some long-term forecasting. Again, it's not 100% accurate, but it's having a stab at what this cost could be for your location, efficiency, and co-benefits. The co-benefits, I think, are also interesting, because it's not just trying to solve that one problem, it's trying to articulate, if you took this measure, here's the additional benefits you have. Top right, you then see that in aggregate, so what does that look like? And then choose water stress, you start to see it like ripple down. So you get the idea. We're taking the operations of an activity, the locations of a company, using the science, bringing the science to life, using AI to do that, to bring it to life, applying a financial quantitative lens to it at some level to make it a very real and strategic impact and decision for an organization. And then lastly, you can see all your assets by location, all in one page, usual stuff. So this isn't ready yet. You're seeing something that most people in EY haven't actually got a chance to see yet, including some of my bosses who will probably see it on LinkedIn before they get to see it. But you get the idea, and you see where we're going with this, with the aim being that we can help. I've talked here about a company, but the same holds for a national government. The same holds for an investor. The same holds for a policymaker. How can I see potential impact around a decision I'm making today? And how can you help me bring that to life? With the science, so it's science-backed, this isn't made up, this is real science-backed models running on massive HPC computes. But how can we use this capability to bring it to life? So this is that one example of what we're doing at a scale level across EY. You're now going to hear from Gregorio, who's going to tell you a little bit about what we're doing at more at a hackathon level almost. So every year we run AI challenges. So 400,000. So think about a 400,000 person hackathon, roughly. That's what it is. And this year we ran that. The aim is we open it up to the whole population. People have got ideas. We give them skills. We give them access to capability. They come up with an idea and they prove or disprove that idea using the technology themselves. A few people are here: Natalie, Wade, Natalie, and Shujan as well. All the 5 winners from this competition this year. And a range of topics, from how do we help like clinical education and the clinical models, all the way through to how do we help Alzheimer's and dementia using AI. But Gregorio won the category on AI for environment. And so we're going to hear from Gregorio about what he did, how he did it, and how is he using AI to make real impact.
Thank you, David. Well, hi everyone. Well, the big question that I have for today is, well, how do you measure the soil health with no technology at all? And in Chile, well, some farmers answer me, and it's with their lips. They literally just stick soil into their mouths and check for acidity, saltiness, bitterness, and the humidity. So they can basically take their different actions and their different treatments on the soil itself. Others also just these big sticks, these big sensors, and go around and stick it into the ground in the whole field, taking days to measure just their plot of lands. Agricultural technology exists, but it isn't really built for the Latin American farmers, small and mid-sized farmers, those traditional farmers that we can really imagine. They still exist out there. So this small and mid-sized farmer, it's really being left behind in this data revolution. And these big enterprise ag-tech technologies require, well, technical teams, connectivity to internet, which is very scarce in those sectors, and most importantly, the budgets. It is in the equation of them. So beside the costs and beside everything, there is this huge barrier in the culture in the Chilean farmer, where they work with the motto, if it works, don't change it. And we're going to keep the tradition we have been running for the last probably 100 years. So if you don't develop and build your machines based on that information, your solution will fail before it even starts. That's why we built Aquo. Aquo is an intelligence, an AI-powered carbon system made for the Latin American farmer to make better decisions in their strategy and their irrigation systems. We're working with a plug-and-play IoT that it's installed directly by the farmers. No external hands needed. They don't really like that. And also with no necessary connectivity to internet. All run locally in the hard and arduous electricity that runs into the agricultural trillion farms. This is streamlined into a machine learning system that can predict and project the different data, flag anomalies before these become losses, and then send it to a transitional Gen AI layer to take it to plain language and into an actionable decision for the farmers. Lastly, and probably the most important part, it would be the responsible AI layer, which it wasn't something we added up at the end of the development. It was something that was a constraint since the start. We had to work with the farmers by our side and design the system as a co-pilot more than, for example, a replacement for them, using an ethical, educable, and grounded in trust system. Well, I would like to stick with that last word, the trust in AI, where Aqua wasn't just a product for tech startups. It's trust for AI for this real farmer. We are securing into local AI infrastructure and secure data architecture, being that the farmer likes to watch and see their machines in place and working, keeping the human in the loop, using their expertise and their culture to feed the system and give it more perspectives, and also working with co-development and fine-tuning since the start. Probably when we thought about this idea, we had a farmer by our side and we worked neck and neck, shoulder to shoulder with them and push the product forward. Well, this pilot in Quillota, región de Valparaíso in Chile, transformed the way the farmer looked at their data. They used the sticks to check on the data in their soils, and they took days. Now we captured 4 times all of their fields in just a day, lowering about 33% of the water usage and about 40% the fertilizer use. There we had, for example, a picture on Quillota's field in Agrícola La Constancia. But aside from all of the numbers and dashboards, the number at the end of the day, the value that I got, was when the farmer came to me and showed me that he finally understood and had data on their own fields. They could finally start to catch up to these big enterprises who had the budgets, who had the technologies to capture all of the data in their fields and start competing to really jump into this market. Okay, now in Chile, we're not that big actually, but we have 250,000 small and mid-sized farmers, but we have millions across Latin America, and we all have the same problem, the same critical decisions with lacking information. So, given that, we can scale by using plug-and-play hardware, working without internet, using language agnostic Gen AI, and we can prove with real pilots and use it in different contexts. Now the real part. After talking with a ton of farmers, investigating the users, the question came to mind, what if AI made advanced technology accessible to everybody? Now, technology can unite communities, but also can widen already existing spaces. It can still create some problems overall. So our responsibility right now, it's not only developing better technology, but also making the technology equal and giving the opportunities to everyone to take the most benefits out of these new changes. So, when going forward, we have to always look at the of what I would call the democratization of technology inside of, especially in the farming industry, and giving the opportunity to everyone to just be a player, and so this basically the small guy can go up to the big guy. So going forward and using this technology in the best way possible, we can use AI to diminish the the inequalities inside of this market and really push the innovation forward inside of Chile and Latin America. Thank you very much. Come here, David.
Thanks. I love that example for a couple of reasons. One is the idea of scale that we talked about. So kind of the scale of the idea that then impacts at a global scale. So you can start at small scale using AI to be able to create large global impact, as I said, but also the scale of where the idea came from. It didn't come from an innovation group somewhere in a company like EY or a bunch of partners, managers, whoever deciding that. It came from practitioners who are living this day to day. And then with the right skills and the right tool, you can do these amazing things. So kudos again for that. We're now going to move on to the AI ecosystem exchange. So what does that mean? This is the third time we've run it. So we ran it first New York Climate Week. We then ran it at London Climate Week. We're here, and we're going to be back at New York Climate Week. Each one has evolved, but they've got the same core principle. The principle here is, as I said earlier, real AI for real impact being applied to real problems, for real outcomes, point one. Point two is, I do not believe, back to my point earlier on collaboration, that any one individual, institution, company has the answer to complicated questions. I'm not even sure one entity would ever understands the question in the first place. So the idea here is collaboration and humility. It's being kind of applying a bit of humility to, we don't have all the answers, we don't necessarily understand the question entirely. So how do we bring together the best of everybody around us to do that? And then the collaboration that's needed to be able to get to better outcomes. So you're going to hear from 4 different examples applying 4 different things. On the left, UNFCCC and the work they've been doing around AI in a data hub. On the back left corner, ERMOS, critical infrastructure. How do we use AI to help make critical infrastructure more resilient? A different kind of infrastructure at the back with Tom and the team there looking at data. And what is the infrastructure we need around data to be able to really understand and define and answer sustainability questions better than we can today. And lastly, but importantly, Green PT on the far right. Looking at how do we ensure that our use of AI becomes more sustainable. So 4 different examples, 4 different areas of opportunity and risk, light and shadow, 4 different companies trying to approach it from different ways. You're now going to get the chance over the next 50 minutes to an hour or so to spend time with each of those. Roughly 15 minutes each. You'll get to hear a little bit from those teams, and then you'll be able to ask whatever you want. How it's been done, what is it doing, how do you scale it, how can you get involved? So that's what's going to happen over the next 45 to 50 minutes. I'll repeat my earlier point. Take the opportunity to connect with other people around you in your groups you haven't met. From a logistics perspective, I should have mentioned this, roughly stay where you are for the first iteration, and then we'll tell you when to move, as it were. So it's a carousel type model. If you're in the middle, just kind of move yourself equally across the groups. One last comment, because then we'll close at the end of this, and we probably won't do a big close around it. If you want to hear more about any of these, come and contact us. If you want to be involved, if you've got an idea, if you're doing a piece of work that you think would be great for us to include in one of these events in the future, please let us know. We have run these to date by events, like I said, London Climate Week, New York Climate Week. We're going to run these more frequently, around themes, around communities, around geographies, around industries, as well as continuing to do it around events. So if you've got ideas, let us know. We'd love to hear the feedback. But we probably won't do a grand close at the end, so I'll thank you all now again. Thank you all for coming and joining us here. Thank you for your attention for the next hour. Take the chance to really explore these, and look forward to seeing you all again in the future.